winter in therapy, at the end of a session, I mentioned that I was exhausted. Not just tired, but fatigued, like a full body drain that made it almost impossible to do anything. This fatigue, I explained, was also accompanied by more frequent tears. I reported this like I reported the weather, which, by the way, in upstate New York was dark, dreary, and fucking freezing. Well, we need a solution for you, my therapist said. You've worked too hard to struggle like that. You deserve to be happy. A solution? Huh, what a novel idea. The evidence is always piled high for me, literally. Stacks of laundry on my kitchen table, dirty clothes all over my bedroom floor, neglected bills and certified letters from the IRS spilled out all over my desk, which is no longer a place to work, but more like a recycling station. The evidence is high, but I'm too low to notice. My depression delivered me at its lowest depths in 2001, in a neighborhood that hadn't yet been assigned a realtor-friendly name. I was living in a 4-story atrocity right under the BQE between Williamsburg and Dumbo. My friend Clara and I called it Dumsburg. It's now referred to as Vinegar Hill. We had gone to check it out with a realtor from Avalanche Realty. I'm not kidding. During what resembled a haunted house tour, we noticed that everything was held together with caulk. The banister, the door frames, the dreaded dark wood paneling, all 4 floors held together with caulk. We took a moment in the basement bathroom to discuss. I fucking hate this place, I said to her. Clara glancing over at the shower head affixed to the wall with, you guessed it, caulk. I know, me too, I admitted. We should take it, right? Yup, she answered, and we did. We hadn't been looking for that long, but we were homeless. Our couch surfing had landed us in a loft with a bunch of other friends, and they had just received an eviction notice. Soon we would all be without a home, and this place, though it was ugly, was huge. Unfortunately, it wasn't until after we signed the lease and sent in our non-refundable security deposit that we realized that all of the windows had been framed in old lady diapers to keep out the breeze. It was in this building, no surprise, that I broke down. My therapist continued to gently suggest medication and AA, both of which I resisted wholeheartedly. Regardless of the fact that I could barely stop crying at this point, I was dead set against being medicated. It was so uncool. Among my group of alcoholic friends, back then we preferred the term partiers, the consensus was that we weren't going to buy into the pharmaceutical conspiracy taking over America. Instead, we'd just get wasted every night and try to think of everything else that we could use. I learned that St. John's wort, if you take it with shots of tequila, is very ineffective. I started jogging, hoping that the endorphins would give me a boost and counteract my hangovers. Every day I ran around Prospect Park, past the carousel, the playground, and the pond, and for all 3.5 miles I cried. It was supposedly impossible to run and cry at the same time, but I was defying laws of nature. It was particularly humiliating when I was teaching preschool and cried more than the kids in my class. I'd hide in the corner of the playground hoping none of the children would notice, but one little kiss-ass always had to say something. Miss Eva, are you okay? Can you try using your words? I woke up one morning crying, the depression just coursing through my blood. I felt contaminated, defective. My mom called. I answered the phone crying and couldn't stop. She didn't know what to do for me. Are you feeling blue again? My mother asked. Blue is what you call it every time I go through a bout of depression. See, she's never experienced depression, so she didn't understand. But the word blue made me fucking crazy. Blue, seriously, Mom? Blue? This is what you're calling the catastrophic disaster that you're talking to? Well, what, Eva? You think when you feel blue it's worse than when other people feel blue? No, Mom, I don't, was all I could muster. I did not think that my blue felt worse than other people's blue. I thought clinical depression felt worse than anyone else's blue, but they aren't the same thing, and I know that because I've experienced both. I thought if she said the word blue again, I might just kill myself. Oh, I wasn't going to actually do it. I just liked fantasizing about it. Sometimes I had a hard time thinking of much else. In fact, I came up with 365 unique ways, one for each day of the year. January 1st, eat a peanut butter and poison jelly sandwich for lunch. January 2nd, practice the bass guitar in the bathtub. January 3rd, lick the baby turtle. Wait, people have died from baby turtle-induced salmonella. I know because I purchased one off the street in Chinatown for the kids in my preschool class and then found out it was illegal to bring them into schools because little baby turtles are deadly. Is anyone home, my mom asked, the desperation stuck in her voice. No, I'm here by myself. Oh, I hate to think of you by yourself when you're like this. It doesn't make any difference, Mom. Well, why don't you go see if you could, I don't know, talk to a neighbor? Talk to a neighbor. Seriously, I will never understand how she came up with that prize piece of advice. But in a strange way, her advice was helpful. It was really diving into this scenario that made me realize I had to come up with a solution that was more promising. I mean, come on, picture it. A, B, or C. A, do I go to the drug dealer's apartment? B, the abandoned building where the homeless grunge kids are squatting? Or C, the Skater Boys brownstone for a nice, soothing, hot mug of bong water? There had to be a better solution. I hung up the phone with my mother and knew I had to do something. I finally gave medication a try, and I couldn't believe what happened. After a few weeks, I felt a sense of myself that I hadn't experienced since I was 5 years old. An inner peace and a contentment that I only remember experiencing as a young child. Not fighting for my life every day freed up my energy. I had always thought meds would rob me of all of my emotions, but all of a sudden I could feel anger, sadness, hurt, fear, and joy. I had an array of feelings instead of just that one, that dreaded depression I always was trying to get away from. If the medication had not worked, I would have been screwed, but it did, which confirmed something I had resisted accepting. I do, in fact, have a mental illness. After a year of being on medication, I became well enough to realize that in addition to clinical depression, there was also my alcoholism. And so with a lot of work, I got sober. After a couple years in sobriety, I thought, maybe since I'm not swinging back bottles of depressants every day, I don't need this stuff anymore. Maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I can be what I always wanted to be when I grew up, normal. In my excitement about possibly being normal, I did what every other mentally ill person has done at least once in their lifetime. I went off my medication just in time for the holidays. Yay! That March, my friend and ex-roommate Clara came to visit me. I had moved from the city back upstate again. She lived with me all through the Great Depression, the pre-medication era. She knew the signs, not that it would take an expert. She knocked on the door of my apartment. I tried to get up and answer it, but my cheek was glued to the couch upholstery. I tried to lift my head up, but it was too heavy to move. Come in, I managed to say. She let herself in. My apartment was dark, and like any sane, normal person, she tried to turn on a light, but all the bulbs were burned out. The apartment smelled like garbage. Eva, you don't usually live like this. I don't, I asked. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. She was worried, horrified, concerned, and scared. You have to go back on your medication. Nearly a decade has gone by, and for the most part, I am very functional. In fact, all of the dreams I once thought impossible are a reality. I own my own home. Nearly a year ago, I got married to Julie, a woman I'm honored to call my wife and best friend, and I do what I absolutely love for a living. Yet there are times, certain months of the year, where I still really struggle, even with therapy and my medication. Forget it, I told my wife on a brisk afternoon this past September. I don't want to do anything anymore. I just want to be a stay-at-home nothing. She heard renditions of this before. What are you talking about? What is that? Well, like a stay-at-home mom, but without kids. Just a stay-at-home nothing. I had melded with my mattress. I had cloaked myself in a sheet of depression that I couldn't get out from under. Julie tried to reason with me. Honey, you'd go crazy if you did nothing at all day. You're being ridiculous, she said. Do you think the weather is starting to get to you? Oh, the weather. Right, the weather. I am always the last to know. After I talked to my therapist, it became clear that in addition to clinical depression, I also suffer from SAD, seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. It's an acronym, and they mean the same thing. On September 1st of any given year, thanks to the beginning of seasonal reduction in daylight, my medication will stop being as effective as it is in the spring and summer, and my depression will slowly start to creep in again. As the days get shorter and the nights get longer and the temperature gets colder, I will become increasingly less functional, and by February, I will be crying a lot. I will have a very hard time getting out of bed, and not just crying when sad things happen, but more or less all the time. And as the cold, dark months pass, it will not occur to me that something can be done about this to change it. Someone will have to clue me in again. But now, at least, when someone brings it to my attention, I don't fight it. My therapist told me to call my psychiatrist, and I didn't argue. I called without hesitation. My doctor made a minor adjustment to my medication, and I'm happy to report that this is the first winter that I was not tempted to lick the baby turtle. These days, I accept that I have a mental illness and act accordingly. I sometimes wish that I didn't have to take meds or alter them when the seasons change. But then I look at the life I get to lead thanks to those meds. I get to take care of myself well. I get to stay up until all hours with my wife, ignoring how tired we are because we're laughing hysterically for hours on end and it's just too good. I get to show up for the job of my dreams, helping other people share their stories and release themselves from shame. I get to have sleepovers with my nephew and play sword fighting and Legos and love him up and not worry that I'm gonna cry more than he does on our play dates. Honestly, I get to get out of bed and smile, even when it's cold and dark outside, and everything after that is gravy. When I start to have a pity party about being mentally ill or needing medication, I think about the unlucky gifted people who suffered through this disease before medication was available, like Virginia Woolf and Vincent van Gogh. And I remind myself to be grateful that I've been able to muster up the courage to share my story with you with both ears intact and no rocks in my pocket.